I try very hard. I'm going to just a bit of a disclosure. I try very hard to teach without notes, but I've put quite a bit of research into this one, so I am just going to have to check my notes so I'm not giving you the wrong study. But what we're going to look at for the next couple of minutes is psychopaths and do they exist? And actually, what is a psychopath? How do I identify them? And are they real? So, my first question then, who are these? Ted Bundy, which one's Ted Bundy? This guy? Yeah, so what did Ted Bundy do? He did eat them, he's not a cannibal. But he did kill a lot of people. Does anyone know who this guy is? Jeffrey Dahmer, yes. Jeffrey is a cannibal. So just to make sure you know, when they searched his house, when they arrested Dahmer and they searched his house, they actually found heads in his fridge. Does anyone know who this gentleman over here is? No, this is Ed Gein. So he collected women's bodies through not just killing them, but through grave robbing from 1945 to 1957. So 12 years he went around killing people. And essentially, a lot of films have been based off of him because he used their bodies to decorate his house and make clothing. Oh. So a little bit gruesome. And then who is this lady? Eileen Wuornos. Yep. So Eileen is one of America's most famous serial killers. And essentially, at one moment, she would appear really friendly. She would be honest about what she's done. And in other times, essentially, she would be vengeful and deny all the crimes that she had committed. So we see these four, particularly if you've got Netflix, you'll see generally we'll find documentaries about these and we tend to see them being called psychopaths. But what we're going to have a look at is, well, what is a psychopath and whether, are they really psychopaths? Will be the question we come to. So when you came back in after lunch, hopefully you will find a little piece of paper on your chair. So, who got a number 1? If you could you please stand up, please? Who got number 1? Is it on the other seat? Who's got number 1? No? Okay, right, so Jez, I want you to stand up for me. If no one's got the number 1, we're going to make Jez stand up. Right, so Jez represents a human, but 0.6 of a human. And Jez represents the statistical, how likely in general population in England and Wales we are to be a psychopath. So Jez represents our 0.6. Jez, you may take a seat. Who got number 2? Could you stand up for me? Right, so Lauren, you got 1%, and this is our non-institutionalized males aged 18 plus in the USA. So 1% of males over the age of 18 that are not in prison are a psychopath. You sit down. Who got number 3? If you got number 3, stand up, please. There should be a few more of you. There should be at least 2 of you. Thank you. Right, so you represent the female prisoners in the UK. So we see the statistic going up just that little bit. Number 4 on your feet. Just 1. We should have a few more number 4s. There should be 4 of you. Now, you 4, thank you. You 4%, you are actually our business leaders, so you are our CEOs. So we see more psychopaths as business leaders than we do in general population who take seats. Number 5s on your feet. So you represent the 8%, and you are male prisoners in the UK. So we're going up a little bit. You can take a seat. Right, so hopefully some of you will find that the 6s and 9s look very similar, but hopefully most of you have got a line underneath. So if you've got what is very obviously a 6, please can you get on your feet? A couple of you. Lovely. So you represent 11% of the population, and these are our female violent offenders. So we're going up once again. Number 7's on your feet. So you guys represent our 16%, and these are the prison or probation population in the USA. Sit down. 8 on your feet. Well, we should start seeing a few more of you. Right, 21%. Now, you're not in prison either, because you're our corporate professionals. Take a seat. And finally, number 9's on your feet. You are the 31%, and you are our male violent offenders. So, now we know who our psychopaths are and what you've done. The point being is that in general population, we see about 0.6 to 1% of the general population being psychopaths. But when we start to separate them, we see maybe more of them in prison, but we also see them as our CEOs and our corporate leaders. So just be aware of the big bosses. But what traits then? Does anyone know a trait of a psychopath? Yes, Laura. Lack of empathy. Any others?
I've always called it genetic, isn't it? It's this NCC, what's in that? Genetic?
Reg, you're going too far now.
Oh.
You're getting ever so scientific. Right, so we find these on the psychopathy checklist. Now we're going to use the revised version, and this was created by Robert Hare in 1991, and it is still used today. That a psychopath can tell you what you're thinking, but what they don't do is feel what you feel. These are people without a conscience. So when we go back and we think about our 31% of violent offenders, do you think they have a conscience? No? What about our business leaders then? Do you think they've got a conscience when they sack you? Do you think P&O bosses have a conscience? But we know statistically they're more likely to be psychopaths than hopefully us in this room. So there's 20 different traits that we look at, but I've only got a couple on the board here. So first of all, we've got superficial charm. They're an individual that can tell people exactly what they want them to hear. They have a lack of empathy, as pointed out. So this is a lack of patience for others' emotional reaction. So they don't care if you're upset, they don't care if you're scared. They're impulsive, so they act without thinking. Does anyone fit into that category? Yeah. So are teenagers, are you psychopaths? Next question. Promiscuous? I don't want to know. They are individuals with very many sexual partners. They are short-tempered. So they lose their temper easily or quickly. And they have a lack of remorse or guilt, so they don't find themselves at fault, even if they have, guys, even if they have purposely done something, they do not see their own faults. So what happens is when the test is carried out, there's 20 traits, and you get a score of 0 to 2 on those traits. A 2 means that that trait is really strong in that individual. A 0 can't be seen at all. So at maximum, on the checklist, you can score a 40. Luckily for you, I score a 9, because the psychopath scores at least 30. So we're looking at quite a high score. So I'm nowhere near a psychopath, so we're good. We see them being released from prison then. So those that we know who've been tested and identified and labelled as a psychopath, 80% of them are found to violate the terms of their release within 3 years of leaving prison. They are 3 times more likely to reoffend, and they are 4 times more likely to reoffend violently. So at this point, we can consider psychopaths as someone that we want to fear. However, what if it's something else? So focusing on sentences in Texas then. So this is where I apologise, I'm going to use my notes a little bit. So one study looked at 18 males, and all of them had been sentenced to death, so death penalty in Texas. Now, in this one study, they found that out of Out of those 18, 6 of them were born prematurely and then had a respiratory illness that led to a compromised central nervous system. So we might be looking at something biological. 2 of them were classed as being intellectually limited. 17 out of 18 of those people on death row came from families with a history of mental illness across multiple generations, and they'd been raised in an abusive and extremely violent family. And also 17 of them had experienced serious head traumas during their childhood. So we also start to see that of those 20 traits, 50% of them are signs of mania, hypomania, and frontal lobe dysfunction. So is someone a psychopath because of their traits, or is it something biological? Now, DSM. The DSM is our a way of analysing and diagnosing someone with a psychological disorder. So antisocial personality disorder, or APD, was deemed by her as similar to the checklist, but none of the DSM editions over the 72 years have agreed to put psychopathy in the diagnostic tool. So at no point can a psychologist use this manual that is used around the world to identify you as a psychopath. They must use Hare's checklist. So my question then becomes, well, if psychopaths are known, why can we not diagnose it psychologically? Why have so many additions not added it in and instead focus on antisocial personality disorder? Then we start to think of it in other terms. So the label. Everyone heard of labeling theory? Yeah, as criminology students, hopefully we have. So if I call someone a psychopath, that comes with a lot of stigmatization. Anyone labelled as a psychopath is associated with high danger, someone to be feared, very criminalised. And actually, when we see people being labelled a psychopath in the courtroom, they are more likely to face harsher sentences. In America, they are more likely to be sentenced to death. Now, is it just a label that we use to legitimise the control of troublesome individuals? The label gets used by the criminal justice system and mental health institutions to legitimise the control of those that are deemed beyond help. They are so criminal that we cannot, like Jez focused on earlier with probation, rehabilitate them. It also allows anything biological or social to be downplayed because they are not a product of their society. They are not a product of the child abuse that they suffered. Instead, they are an evil person. Possibility or probability. Psychiatry needs to be scientific, so does psychology. Now, to do that, essentially, it must be consistent, there must be a method, it must be cognitive, as well as objective. Now, a diagnosis of psychopathy should be based on probability. The likelihood is you are probably a psychopath. So that 11% of business leaders are likely or probable. However, especially within the criminal justice system, we use leading terminology. And so when we're talking to lay persons in a courtroom, so who would our lay persons be in a courtroom? Magistrates, who else? Jury. So as lay persons, we're not necessarily that good at picking out scientific errors. So leading language can help us to make a decision. The other thing that's also found is around the characteristics of those carrying out the checklist. So they found that the checklist, the clinician carrying out their personality actually affects the scores that they give, raising the question of how effective is that checklist? Because if all of us carried it out on someone else, we would judge them differently. Now, the whole point of psychiatry is that it is clear, objective, and we can deliver the same diagnosis. But then suggests around looking at our brain. So there's 2 areas of the brain that have been found to be linked with psychopathy. So orbital frontal cortex and the amygdala. So Blair in 2003 3 found that those with a high psychopath test had a weaker amygdala activation for our fear responses. And another study found that the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, so those are our areas used for decision making, controlling our fear, processing our fear, abnormalities were found in both young and old psychopaths. However, can we tell from someone's brain scan whether they're a psychopath or not? At the moment, the idea is no, we are not that advanced. We cannot just look at someone's brain activity and decide that they are a psychopath. However, whilst I've mentioned antisocial personality disorder, what we do see is a link between, so comorbidity, meaning that you are diagnosed with 1 or 2 or more things. Psychopaths are also likely to suffer from substance misuse. So is their behaviour a response to the substances they're using? They are also more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. So are they a psychopath or are they schizophrenic? This comorbidity between these disorders significantly increases the likelihood of being imprisoned, having a relapse, and the assessment of criminal responsibility. Us. We've got our TV, we've got all our media telling us about all these psychopaths, but we know that experts, those carrying it out, have an impact on how they judge their individuals. We know that they're more likely to become diagnosed with something else, like schizophrenia. We know that there is a lack of scientific evidence to prove that someone is a psychopath. And we also know there is an issue with the validity of this test. Why is it not currently in the DSM? Why do we only see antisocial personality disorder? And that leaves us with our final question. Do they actually exist? Or is it a label that we give to unwell criminals that we cannot or will not rehabilitate? What do you think? So, any thoughts?
I want to know what your opinion is.
My opinion? Who asked that one? I say no, they don't. I believe it's a label that we use because we feel that, if I go back, because it's easier, oh my goodness, I should just go back to the beginning, shouldn't I? It's easier to label these people as psychopaths than it is to understand that society created Ted Bundy. It is nicer for us to understand that Eileen Wuornos is different to us rather than the society we all live in created her. It is easier to understand that someone that creates clothing out of human skin is not the same as you. So by giving them this label, we can put them in a box and say, that's why they're that bad, instead of fixing what created them. That's my thought. Yes.
So if you killed someone, would you feel in this fire?
Me? Yes.
So how does that make you say this is connected?
They didn't. However, is that a product of their society? Is that a product of their upbringing? If they were abused by their mum, Eileen Wuornos was systematically raped by her own family members, does that not create an individual that feels no remorse when she fights back? Potentially, is it a product of the way that they were brought up? Because we know that predominantly none of these individuals had a very nice childhood. We see a lot of blame being placed on mothers, fathers, grandparents, the trauma that they went through, the head injuries that they've had. Maybe it's about the structure in their brain. Who knows? But thanks very much. We've now got Fiona.